Today I'm here with Bruce. He's an executive creative director at Best Buy. Can you please just introduce me to your current role and Best Buy?
Okay. Well, first of all, Best Buy is the largest electronics tech retailer in the United States. I mean, of course, there's Amazon as well, but the difference with Best Buy is that we actually have brick and mortar stores and, over 100,000 employees. We're just the dominant retailer of tech. And that means everything from televisions to computers to home appliances, small appliances, just anything to do with tech, fitness equipment, health equipment.
Uh, Current role as executive creative director. What does that involve?
Well, I spent my whole career on the agency side, so this is the first time I've been in-house. And what we did is basically created an agency level of a creative department within Best Buy. And so we lead and do all of the major brand work. So the television commercials, the social videos, the overall design language for the whole company is all done by my group. And then we have agency partners to do some of the high volume digital work like digital display, kind of entry level social, because we're just a massive brand that's spending a huge amount of money in media. But it's kind of different than usually how in-house groups is. It's kind of the opposite of that. There's an agency hired to do the major brand work, and then the in-house group is doing the more transactional digital work. So we've kind of flipped that on its ear, based on my background and what I was able to bring in here.
Interesting. I like it's kind of a trend globally to bring more of the forces in-house. Kind of the benefits you see of having these in-house capabilities.
Well, the main benefit is we're just kind of closer to the brand. I mean, we just understand how our business works, how the tech world works. And, having been on the other side in the agency world, you're going between different accounts. One week you're working on a hotel, another week an airline, another one a car manufacturer. Here we're just really focused on our brand, and we know the people, so it's just more efficient, and we just know the brand and we're faster, but I think it also results in better work, and that's the most important thing.
And how has that transition been for you to go from the agency outside of the companies to being in-house and leading this team?
Well, first of all, we tried to make it very, very similar deliberately to what you might do in an agency. So, it feels like an agency and how we're structured. There's the same kind of support mechanisms with producers, account managers, project managers, all that kind of the mechanics of an agency we have, but it's just in-house.
I'd like to go over to where you started. How did you get into this creative world in this industry? You have thing that inspired you to go into it, or was it kind of a coincidence?
Well, I think kind of what inspired me when I was a little boy is that my father was a VW dealer in a small town. And he had these books of VW ads, and it was the glory years of the Beetle, and the Volkswagen bus and the Karmann Ghia, and the great ads done by Doyle Dane Bernbach. And I would see those in the dealership, and they were so clever and simple and, some of the most iconic advertising ever done. So I think that's what triggered my interest in it. And then I had studied advertising in college and got my degree in it, in that and journalism. But then I was fortunate enough when I graduated to be able to join in a very short time, be on the ground floor of one of the great creative agencies in the world, which was Fallon McElligott Rice. And I was there right from the beginning and stayed 25 years. And I like to say to people, it's kind of like being invited to join the Beatles, because the agency just won every creative award, and it was just such a hot agency for so many years. And I just met so many great people, creative directors, producers, fellow creatives.
Important do you think that is to kind of be surrounded by really talented people to succeed in this industry?
It's huge. It's night and day. I think the most difficult thing in our industry is selling a great idea. And so when you're at a place where it's just expected that you're going to push it, that you're going to break some boundaries, that you're going to do something that's out of the ordinary, first of all, that's what, at an agency like that, that's what the clients come for. So they're predisposed to expect bold ideas. And then you have the whole support structure of an agency that is just like, well, this is how we do it. This is what we do. You know, there was not the kind of compromise that sometimes stifles creativity in a lot of agencies, where the politics, it was very much like clients came for this kind of work and this is what we deliver.
Can you take me back to like some of your early work? Like what kind of businesses or brands did you get to work with in the beginning?
Well, right out of the gates, I worked for Bloomingdale's, which was the great New York retailer. And my client was a great fellow creative named John Jay. And we did these beautiful, stunning full-size ads in the New York Times every week that were long copy and beautifully crafted about the lengths that Bloomingdale's went to find unusual, great goods. So that was literally my first account I worked on. And then very shortly after that, we got the Porsche account. So I worked on Porsche for almost 4 years. Still a young writer, and it was just an amazing time to work on that brand. I'm going to age myself and say that it was the late 80s, early 90s, but that's when it was. And we were still doing print advertising largely. We did a few spots in TV, but generally Porsche was still a niche player in the United States, and we were doing print advertising, but magazine and newspaper even. So, but during that period, I wrote 98 print ads for Porsche, and they still show up in social media every other day because we wrote the kind of lines that still apply to why people buy a Porsche and what Porsche stands for.
Have any role models? Yeah.
Well, again, as a young kid, I was always inspired by the great VW Beetle work done by Dale Danes. So I think that in the entire creative team there, and actually the principal, Tom McElligott at the agency, Fallon McElligott Rice, was just an amazing writer, and he was certainly a role model for me in terms of his style of writing. He didn't stay there very long. He was only at Fallon, even though he helped found the agency for a few years and then left. But he was certainly an inspiration.
Do you have any, that you studied journalism?
Yes.
Do you have like any specific skills focused on like copywriting or directing or?
It was definitely copywriting. I'm a writer through and through. And, it was kind of the golden age of the print ad. So a headline and beautifully crafted copy were so important. I mean, we did some, ads early in my career that had 2,000 words of body copy on them, so it was the craft of writing, and it had to be clever and smart and right for the brand. So I think it taught me craftsmanship, which is still something that's important to me now with everything we do. I always stress craft above all else to my team. And the kind of people that I've worked with, that's what they care about. So every nuance in a TV spot, how's the sound, what's the edit, and just sweating all the details kind of were ingrained in me from the beginning of doing that finely crafted print advertising.
Do you think industry has changed, and what has changed since you started?
Well, I mean, just the speed of technology has changed everything in that, originally we just had more time to do everything. So you could sweat the details. Now, the pace is so fast. And for things like the social videos that we do, they need to be turned around so much faster than, a traditional television commercial where we're able to sweat every detail. And I understand that as a consumer because my attention span is shorter and I scroll through things and I live in social media as well. So I understand the need to have more content and for it to be, faster and cheaper. On the other hand, when something is just, beautifully produced and a great story, it still has the opportunity to break through.
I think there's different skills required today than when you started.
Yeah, I think you need to be aware. First of all, you just can't sit still at any point. Things when I started were so set as, you know, categories like magazine ads, newspaper ads, television, radio. And now you just need to be utterly tuned into every kind of social media, every kind of content, every form of storytelling. So I think you just need to be more curious, honestly, and you need to never stop growing.
When you are building a team, if it's an agency or in-house, what kind of specific skills would you look for?
Well, I mean, obviously it still comes down to a portfolio showing what you could do, and looking for the promise in that. Maybe they haven't done the biggest campaign, but you can see a glimmer of something there. I do look for craft, and an art director, how they deal with images and make videos, and the writers, the same thing, the words, the music, all that matters. So I look for a combination of great ideas and craft. And then it comes down to meeting the person. Do you feel that there's some fire in them? And do you feel like it's somebody you want to work with? There's a lot of, flames that burn brightly, but for a short amount of time in our industry. So it's nice to work with people that you like and respect as well. So that character is also really important to me.
I think that might be one of the hardest thing to find out. Like, do you have any methods to find that out, like early on? How do you know it's a good fit for your team or for working with you?
I like to say that instead of an interview, it should be a really good conversation. And I think coming out of that, you can tell, rather than asking typical interview type questions when you're interviewing someone, make it a conversation, find out about them personally, ask them, one of the things that I think is super important with creative people is resilience, because no matter where you are, things are going to die. And how do you react to that? Do you mope or do you go make something better? So I look for that resilience, and I look for character. I look for someone who cares, someone who is honest as well in how they present themselves.
I think like you're describing is kind of the same qualities. Like, no matter where technology goes, you will still need to have these qualities to be hired and to work in great teams.
That's true. Very true.
Then let's go back to your work. Do you have any paints or projects or things you've been working on that you are more proud of, like something you put very high up there?
Well, going back in my history, the most important thing I did, and probably one of the most important things Fallon as an agency did, was BMW Films. And that was the next account I worked on after Porsche. After a couple of years, we got the BMW North America account and did a lot of the international campaigns for BMW. But in the early 2000s, we came out with a series of short films that only ran online, starring Clive Owen, who was then an unknown actor, as this mysterious driver for hire. and they were produced by David Fincher, and then the second batch was produced by Ridley and Tony Scott, and it was a who's who of top Hollywood directors that directed these films. And we had everybody from Madonna to James Brown to Gary Oldman, Dakota Fanning. All these amazing people were the guest stars, and each film was unique. They were about 8 minutes long, and they were fully realized Hollywood films that only ran on the internet. And they won every award at Cannes. They created a new award for them because they felt that it went above and beyond everything, called the Titanium Lion, Best of Show everywhere, because they just really showed a new way forward. And when we did them, think about it, early 2000s, there was no YouTube. So not only did we figure out a way to produce and write these films, but we also had to create our own YouTube. So we had a really strong tech team at Fallon, and they took Apple's QuickTime technology, and basically we created our own YouTube so people could watch these films. But that was definitely my proudest moment. And they worked like, their case studies at the Harvard Business School, they really worked, as well as being incredibly entertaining.
Amazing, like to be able to work on something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, what kind of results did it create for the business? Like, how do you measure the effect of something like that?
Well, BMW was very, first of all, they took an incredible risk to do this, but they also measured consumer perceptions and, really believed in measurement, both before and after. And first of all, their sales took a big spike. They took a big jump in the cool factor as a result of this, because, all of a sudden Clive Owen was the embodiment of the brand for a lot of people. But they measured everything, and they even got an uptick in safety, because there were these, really well-reckoned chase scenes, for example, like Guy Ritchie directed one, just incredibly over the top. But the car, could perform. So it spoke to active safety. So it performed in ways that they didn't even imagine when we first launched them, that it would have that potential.
In a high-performing team like that, what also going from being maybe more hands-on, as you were earlier in your career, to more an executive and leading teams, what's your perspective on like creative leadership?
Well, I think, first of all, I love being a creative leader. And I think it's really about setting your team up for success, hiring the right people, giving them the support at every step of the way, making them feel valued, I think is a really important part of what I do, making them understand that ideas are precious, and I respect that. So I look at creative leadership as being, both a mentor and a leader, and this is how we do things. And then choosing people that I think embody the same qualities that I have. The senior creatives also are part of the leadership team. So everyone sets an example, I think, for others to follow, and sets a bar about how to succeed. I also know that creative people are competitive by their nature, and I don't need to create a false sense of competition. So I'm deliberately don't pit one team against another and have, jump balls about everything, but rather, no, I'm going to trust this team to deliver this idea. I don't need 4 teams working on it just to cover my bases.
Personally, how do you stay inspired after all these years? Like, inspires you?
I just new ideas, I pay attention, and when I see something really new, I want to beat it. There's that kind of competitive thing. And When I see someone else do something new, it inspires me to do something new. I also find my inspiration in other forms of creativity, like product design and architecture and, you know, music and film. Because I think if all you do is think about advertising, that can be kind of limiting. And I think some of the best inspiration comes from other forms of art.
Kind of art form do you enjoy the most? Do you have like one specific, or is it several?
Well, I got my degree in journalism and advertising, but I started in the architecture school. So I've always loved architecture. And I think if I had a chance to start over my career, I'd be a product designer. I just love product design. So that's probably architecture and product design are the ones that inspire me the most. But also, you can't be a creative without film inspiring you as well, every aspect of that.
Where do you see like the future going with new technology and AI, like new capabilities within the visuals, especially? Do you think it's going to make things better or worse?
Well, I mean, it could make things worse. It's up to us to make them better, to find ways to utilize them. When I think about AI right now and I think about how we're using it, it's for those things that just take time but don't really add to the creativity at this point. Things like creating our storyboards. All my art directors and designers are using those. Creating images to illustrate an idea, not a final image. Maybe helping to summarize while you're doing research for something. So, we're not really using AI for anything external, mainly because of all the privacy issues around it, but as a tool for helping to save time on the more rote or routine portions of our business. I think it's fine. On the other hand, I also see artists using AI to create, just as a tool. It's another form of painting, as it were, So I think that is definitely in the future where, if you can dream it, you can make it. So I think that as an art form, I think there's some real possibilities there.
Absolutely. I recently talked to a film director that works within AI, and he won a few prizes already, and it's pretty early on. And he
Yeah.
said the only thing you really can't replace is the actors. Yeah, there's no emotion behind the eyes, or like if it's people in it. And I've seen several people like say that actors are probably the last people to be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
Your perspective on that? Like,
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think that kind of nuance that only comes from a human is pretty tough to replicate in AI. But on the other hand, at the speed it's progressing, I don't want to look like a fool and say that it couldn't happen someday, but I think that's probably the last place. But again, I think it's just an interesting tool if you use it correctly.
coming from the mobile industry and your experience there, it would be interesting to hear your perspective on Jaguar. Like everybody's talking about that at the moment. Have you seen the recent rebranding there?
Yeah, I just think it's just awful. I mean, it's a brand where the only reason to buy it is that there's some heritage there. It's the only way to keep it alive. And to me, it just looked very superficial and like anybody could have done that branding. Very disappointed in it. There's a fine line between taking what you are and then building on it versus throwing everything away. And I think that's what they're doing. We'll see.
It remains to see, but like what could be the benefits from doing that? Like their
Yeah.
sales have been going down for the past 6 years, I think. Like
Yeah.
what benefits could come from this?
Yeah. The same parent company obviously owns Land Rover and Range Rover. And that also is kind of where the market is, in terms of utility vehicles versus sedans. So it's already an uphill climb for Jaguar. And it doesn't really make sense for them to make the same vehicles, but branded, with a different face than the Range Rover version. So it's going to be a tough climb for him.
Well, to people like starting out today, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but do you have advice to people who wants to go into the creative industry today?
Well, first of all, it's tough, just have to be on top of your game. It's really competitive. It still comes down to demonstrating something that you can do. Portfolio might be an old-fashioned word, but you do need to create something to show what you could create in the future for a potential employer. I think it's important to have some kind of educational background, whether it's art school or some writing, whichever side that you plan to go into. I think art schools still are really, really valuable. And then just remaining incredibly curious and looking at every emerging trend is super important.
Thank you for your insights, Bruce. We're going towards the end. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I've done this a long time and I still enjoy it. It still brings me joy. And I realize that I have to be on the top of my game every day. As I like to say to my team, I still bring the heat. And often creatives, especially in advertising, they burn brightly and then disappear quickly. And that's not true in other things like architecture, for example, or even music, where there's more longevity in what they do. I'm thankful that I've had longevity, but I've also worked hard for it.
I think that's a good way to end this conversation. And again, thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. And have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Stefan.